and welcome back to their hardware news recap for the week. I just got back from Germany. We went over there to visit Der Bauer mit Acht to check out his factory. So that video is coming up. It's going to take a while to edit. We shot for something like 12 hours. He and I talk a lot. Go figure. So anyway, we're back for the news. There's actually some pretty good news this week. It was a good roundup. So the B580 and the B570 cards have been pretty much fully detailed at this point. Intel's Arc cards from its partners. So we're going to go over some of the partner models that have been announced. The review, of course, already live. The card was overall well received. And then SteamOS is looking like it's getting some movement for third-party devices, which is pretty cool. And we've been waiting for that on desktop for a while now. Additionally, Arctic has a passive under-desk PC. Thermal Grizzly has launched a thermal Putty. I was sitting next to Der Bauer when they launched the product. He didn't know they launched. I found out before him that they launched it. And we've got some other news for the week. Let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by Height and the Y70 case. The Height Y70 case has a lot of polish and heavy attention to detail on the finer points. The case can fit radiators that are massive in depth to the side mount, has cooling in the floor of the case for direct intake to the GPU, and tries to find a balance between structural support of dust filters without obstructing too much intake. The Y70 is a follow-up to the popular Y60, which got Height to where it is today with its cut-corner tempered glass cases. Learn more at the link in the description below. All right, first up, just rounding up some of the recent charity drives that have been going on. We've pretty much closed all the ones we were working on, so here's the update for you all. So we included a couple. The first one was a drive for cat angels. There was another one for archive.org, which I'm really excited to support because we use their stuff all the time for these investigations these days, like the NZXT one. And then we also have some news about Der Bauer's GPU giveaway he's doing for charity over on his channel. I signed the card when I was out there. And in addition to Der Bauer's signature, it also has Jensen Huang's signature on it. So a little bit of a disparity in, well, just about everything between those, our two signatures and Jensen Huang's. All right, so a few weeks ago, we ran a brief charity drive for Cat Angels, which is a local no-kill cat shelter and adoption center that we've supported for years. We tallied the total, and between the sales drive and some extra we threw on top with help from distribution as well, the total amount ended up at $4,800, which is awesome for Cat Angels. I have to emphasize it is a very small local shelter. So that amount is big for them. It'll help cover food costs for the cats, vet visits, even just rent for the building, stuff like that. And without being prompted, the team emailed us after the donation. They sent us this message with a picture of a cat that they have at the center right now and said, quote, "Thank you so very, very much for your extremely generous donation to Cat Angels Pet Adoption. Your continued support is appreciated by us. It means so much to us." I let them know, as always, that this is possible because of you all in the audience who participate when we do these types of things. And they also got a lot of donations from viewers as well. So they normally notice even the $10, $20 ones and email me and say thanks because they'll get a note from someone who says they watch GN. They also let me know, just updating those of you who are following this, but their newly leased location will be granted its building permit soon, which means they can upfit their shelter for the cats because they were forced out of their old one because the landlord sold the building. New large megacorp landlord said, "Ew, animals, get out," forced them out, and now they have a new spot. But they're going to have some money at least to work on the upfit. All right, as for archive.org, Cat Angels was very happy, so thanks everyone for contributing to that one. Archive, we ended up raising $4,200 after topping it off with some extra. We made that contribution in the past couple days. This was the one that we decided to support during our NZXT coverage. So we've been using Archive forever. I mean, the Wayback Machine, if you know it. And it archives websites. It saves a version of pages that have been stored on their servers. And it has become tremendously important for us this past year as companies try to get in front of stories, rewrite history, change their websites while we're working on something. And having that utility has enabled us to catch companies as they're trying to rewrite history and hide some of the things that they've published in their marketing and other materials. So it was time to finally support Archive directly. A lot of you emailed us or commented and said that you had donated to them directly as well, which you can do at archive.org. And they provide, we think, an invaluable service for not only preserving digital history, but they are also worldwide. So very cool and useful for everybody, keeps companies honest. It enables outside investigators and the community to sort of police things that are getting changed. And then additionally, we're looking forward to just continuing to support them in the future as well, because they have had a very hard time the last couple of years. Archive, if you don't know, keeps getting legally challenged by companies because they preserve things, and that's bad for most large mega corporations. All right, finally, we just visited Der Bauer for a factory tour. So while we were visiting, you can see some of the footage on the screen. We're not ready with the video yet, but we're working on it. While we were visiting, he asked me to sign a GPU, previously signed by Jensen Huang. He and I joked a lot about reducing its value by adding our signatures next to Jensen's, but in reality, the drive will do a lot of good for the various groups he's chosen. Roman spent, I think, $16,000 or something like that buying this card for a Make-A-Wish charity drive previously, and now he is doing a giveaway for his audience, so we'd implore you to go check out that video for the drive he's doing now. We're also doing a match of up to $3 grand with his audience, split between various groups that he has selected to support. He just updated me, by the way, and we've already blown way past that match, so we'll be contributing that when he lets me know where to send it. It's a great thing he's doing. It's fun for the end of the year. Check it out, and he's uploaded it to his channel. Okay, now into the news. Now that we've gotten the nice stories out of the way, we can get into the depths of corporate greed, trade wars, and all the other stuff. But there's actually some just straight up hardware news first. Before we get to all of that. So Intel officially launched its GPUs in the second generation of its Arc lineup of DGPUs. They were actually very well received overall. We liked it. The B580 is the one they're launching right now. They've got a B570 coming out in January. That coverage is on the channel and plenty of other channels and websites. And broadly speaking, seems to be pretty well received. It's got still some caveats, but it is the card has now advanced past the point where the Alchemist lineup was, where it was a little bit of an uncertainty to recommend because we didn't want people to end up with something that was too frustrating. B580's really pushed past that, and it's something that can get some wide recommendation now for mid-range GPUs. So anyway, that launched, and it had very impressive 4K performance and also 1440p performance. 1080p, it started losing some of the ground that it gained, but in 4K scenarios, the card was phenomenally good in a lot of the tests that we ran, and that was cool to see. It also has very strong RT performance versus AMD, and then the cost benefit overall, the value of the card is pretty solid. So anyway, considering the overall success, we thought it'd be worth briefly rounding up some of the partner models that are out there, because Intel's got more of them this time. And we'll start with the Intel card itself. So $250 is the baseline MSRP. Partners are all over the place. Starting with Intel, the limited edition, as they call it, has an overall similar, if slightly simplified look compared to the previous gen first-party card. It's all black, has a relatively large flow-through area at the end of the cooler, and a single PCIe 8-pin power connector. The fan side features one of our favorite shapes here at GN, the squircle. We did a teardown of the card, and the cooler's fins are oriented vertically, which will exhaust air towards the motherboard and towards the case side panel. Nothing weird with that. Our teardown shows that Intel massively improved by moving from the 56 or so screws of the nightmarish A770 to a much more reasonable count on the B580. It was so reasonable, it wasn't worth counting. Plus, there's a distinct absence of glue and tape on this model. Oh, Intel. Come on. Really? The improvement is huge for anyone who might want to open and maintain the devices, and Intel made some serious ground here. ASRock has two designs of the B series cards right now that we know of. There's the Steel Legend OC, which has a white and gray colorway with RGB elements in the 3 translucent fans and a plate along the outside edge, with a sizable flow-through portion and 2 8-pins for power. The ASRock Challenger OC is scaled down with only 2 fans, smaller flow-through, a black colorway, and a single power connector. We're not sure what the power budget is for these two cards by the BIOS, the V-BIOS, but partners have the ability to boost power budget for better boosting headroom, or at least provide a higher power offset for overclocking. Gunnir, affiliated with Colorful, is no longer going into the Unconwa and has moved on to, quote, explore frontiers with its B580 Photon. Now, we're not entirely sure if these ones are real for 2 reasons. The first, there weren't any obvious typos on the video card itself this time. Last time they had both into the Unconwa and into the Unknow. There's no N at the end of it, it's just into the Unknow. They tried twice. They didn't get it right either time, and it's okay. But the new one appears to be not only spelled correctly, but outrageously expensive. So we saw some listings, and the only photos of the card right now officially when we're filming this were on Amazon Newegg, and one of those was a third-party listing, which you can never trust for pricing. Newegg appeared like it might be the actual listing, but either way, the cards go up to $410 sometimes on Amazon and Newegg. So regardless of whether that's first or third party, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is do not spend $410 on a B580. That's completely insane. The card is a $250 baseline price. You should be spending under $300 on even the sort of the best of partner models right now. Anyway, the Photon is a 3-fan, 2-slot design in black or white with a new Illuminati-esque logo on the backplate. Gunnir will also have the Index, a shorter design presumably for playing VR games. That was a Valve Index joke. Maybe that's too obscure now. The company also showed off a low-profile card, but it may be limited to OEMs. The low-profile stuff's pretty cool, though. Acer is coming back for Intel's Arc Round 2 with the Nitro OC design. Both the name and the overall look are similar to some Sapphire cards. We think the B580 Nitro is the most visually refined, barring the large graphic on the backplate. We also like how open the flow-through area is, covered by a very largely spaced hexagon pattern to minimize impedance, while still having some kind of flare. This is definitely encroaching on Sapphire's design language and naming in some places, though. Sparkle, affiliated with Power Color actually, is up next with its Titan OC B580 and Guardian OC B570, which isn't out yet. The backplates both have an enormous B stamped into them. We hope this continues for Arc cards because it'll make them easy to tell apart in the most functional way. It's also kind of weird to just have a gigantic letter B in the middle of your computer, but like function here. We'd like to see more material removed from the backplate and the flow-through area. Sparkle has a dual fan and a triple fan solution for its B580 and future B570 cards with varying degrees of pre-overclock. Sparkle's an old school VGA brand that just came back for Intel, so they've been supporting the Arc series since Alchemist. Up next is Maxsun. When Maxsun isn't busy lying about our reviews of products that we bought and paid for, it's apparently launching new Arc GPUs. Maxsun is a new board partner for Intel Arc, bringing white 3-fan iCraft B580s and a black and red milestone card. I look forward to when we buy one, spend our own money on it, do a completely independent review and analysis of it, and then Maxsun takes a screenshot, puts us on their website with me standing there saying that it was a marketing exercise. And so Maxsun, when you do that with the Arc cards, I'll give you a new screenshot you can use. It's this. We'll blur them. And just to be clear, if you missed that whole Twitter thing a while ago, we paid for all of the testing, the purchase of the card. They were not involved at all. They didn't know we had it. They didn't know we bought it. That was for the Mega Gamer that they launched. And for some reason, Maxsun decided it made more sense to act like they sent it to us and paid us to review it, which is not how we work, is extremely offensive, and is also just strange because it's like, wouldn't you want someone to independently look at it and then say it's good? Like, why would you take credit of that as paid marketing exercise? I don't know. Anyway, they launched Arc cards. So next time I want to deal with them on Twitter, I guess we'll review one. Onyx is last, a totally brand new company, which according to BenchLife was founded in late August of this year and is potentially associated with Sapphire. Now, we haven't been able to verify this at this time. We asked Intel. We haven't checked with Sapphire or Onyx yet, but regardless of affiliation, Onyx will have two models, the Lumi in white with RGB and the Odyssey in black. Both feature flow-through coolers with 2 fans. Up next, some really cool stuff. So Valve is pushing SteamOS for third-party partners, something we're excited about. Valve has published some guidelines that contain a new Powered by SteamOS logo, and it has a description of, quote, for hardware running the SteamOS operating system implemented in close collaboration with Valve. This indicates that the company is preparing to allow third parties to use SteamOS on their devices. The full guidelines read this, quote, the Powered by SteamOS logo indicates that a hardware device will run the SteamOS and boot into SteamOS upon powering on the device. In other words, it would be the primary OS. Partners, manufacturers will ship hardware with a Steam image in the form provided by and or developed in close collaboration with Valve. Physical alterations should not be made to the logo, and it should not be combined with any other branding elements, end quote. They also showed an example of physical packaging, eliminating any doubt that there will be non-Valve devices available with SteamOS out of the box. At the time of writing, we don't know which companies are working with Valve on the collaboration. It did appear like Lenovo is, because there was another story as a rumor about a potential Legion Go Steam device. But either way, this is not quite a full release of the OS as an official generic installer. It is one step closer to the edge, and it's about to break onto the market though. We cannot take Windows anymore. We've said everything we've said before. SteamOS though has done well on handheld to be a welcomed addition to desktop. It's actually probably one of the main things we're kind of waiting on for potentially introducing Linux gaming testing to our test suite. That's something we could do now. One of the biggest challenges is just the videos are huge, so we'd have to figure out, is it a separate video, is it part of the main reviews or whatever. But anyway, we're kind of waiting on SteamOS as a potentially big trigger for us to begin Linux testing and hardware reviews. So looking forward to that. One of the only things that's really holding back SteamOS from wide desktop support, other than them launching it, would be kernel level support for anti-cheat software, which is in basically every major multiplayer game at this point, and general driver support for users who aren't already familiar with Linux. But this is something we've been thinking about a lot lately, and SteamOS moving to third-party solutions is a good step for that. All right, next up, Thermal Grizzly launches its Thermal Putty. I was sitting next to Der Bauer, actually. We're driving to a factory when Thermal Grizzly sent out a press release to the media about the launch of its new TG Putty, and I read the email notification when it came in, and he said, "Oh, we launched that today? Nice." Thermal Grizzly has launched a lineup of 3 different thermal putty options. Putty is commonly used on video cards as a more easily deformable material that provides the gap-filling upsides and some of the thinness of paste, but while remaining useful for larger gaps where paste won't work. This was heavily used, for example, on EVGA GPUs back in the day. Thermal Grizzly's new TG Putty is intended for height differences as a gap filler, with TG officially noting a range of 0.2 to 3.0 millimeters. The solution is applied manually and as needed rather than using a thermal pad. Typically, thermal putty is scooped from the container or ejected from a syringe and then spread over the desired area and squished on reassembly. Thermal Grizzly's 3 models are Basic, Advanced, and Pro in ascending order of thermal conductivity. The solutions use different colors to differentiate them, but they have no impact on performance. And actually, we got to see some of the coloring process for the paste in the factory. Again, that tour is it'll take us quite a while to put together, but I'm looking forward to showing it. All right, Arctic's up next. So they have launched a new pre-built PC that is passively cooled and attaches to the bottom of a desk. It's called the Senza, and they're saving on ink costs because it's all lowercase letters. The Senza, lowercase s, is available with the 5500 GT, 5700G, or 5700G Pro Ryzen chips. Pricing ranges from €600 to €730, depending on SKU, and is not available in the US at the time of writing. The PC itself is a heavily ventilated slim metal box that you attach under a desk, containing a single board computer, a unique flattened air cooler, and front panel connections. Arctic's render shows an actual AM4 socket, SODIMM memory, a full 2280 M.2 slot, and 2 standard internal USB 3 headers. Assuming the render is accurate, we like that none of these major components are soldered onto the board. This should set the Senza up for being easily repairable and upgradable depending on the cooler support. The cooler is essentially a quad heat pipe dual tower air cooler that's been flattened with widely spaced fins. That wide spacing is typically better in passive setups. We talked about that in the NHP1 review if you want to learn why. Arctic claims that the Senza won't have any bloatware apps whatsoever, with the Windows OS and drivers the only things pre-installed. We always consider that a major plus if the system integrator provides a clean setup. Strangely, it's only shipping with the N version of Windows 11, which actually I was not familiar with before this. It lacks media features, including Windows Media Player, any media playback, and the ability to use a camera out of the box. If we understand it correctly, all of these features can be added in by the user with free official downloads provided by Arctic or Microsoft itself. Officially, this is only supported with solid wood-like desktops. They are not officially supporting metal, glass, or anything else. You could find solutions to mount it that way and get creative, but they are intending it for use with wood screws. So the most challenging part of the installation is probably just going to be using 4 screwdrivers at once. It's actually going to be how I do teardowns from now on. I'm going to start quad-wielding screwdrivers. We're going to really increase suddenly the teardown videos are going to be like 5 minutes long, just really rip through all the screws. I don't know, I'm not sure why we wrote this line in here, but we're leaving it in, because I like the image of quad-wielding screwdrivers. Up next, according to John Peddie Research, Q3 2024 saw an increase in the sale of GPUs, but it's largely been driven by integrated graphics, with the discrete market seeing a decline. So by our typical audience standards, not really that much of an increase. JPR wrote this, quote, as indicated in the following chart, AMD's overall GPU market share increased by 0.8% from last quarter. Intel's market share rose by 1.1%, JPR said directly, and NVIDIA's market share decreased by 1.9%. End quote on that. Now, looking at it from a year-over-year perspective, John Peddie Research reports that total GPU shipments rose by 2.4%. This was largely carried by notebook GPUs, with a noted decline in desktop. A lot of these research firms look at the total market, so it's not really as hyper-focused on a specific segment as what we're used to covering. But the fact that AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA are all gearing up to launch or are launching new desktop GPUs probably explains part of this slowdown, where most people likely have been just waiting until the 50 series launches, or now with Battlemage, to see how that goes. So we'll see. Be interesting to see if Intel picks up any market share in the discrete desktop GPU market with the Battlemage launch for Q4, but it looks like Q1 of 2025 is going to be when we see the real movement with the launch of everything from NVIDIA and AMD. On the CPU side, John Peddie Research reported this, quote, overall CPU unit shipments increased by 12% from last quarter. AMD's increased by 15%, and Intel's decreased by 12%, end quote. From a year-over-year perspective for CPUs, the research firm reports that there's been a 7.8% increase. Providing further context to the numbers and a prognostication of things to come, the research firm stated, quote, AMD and Intel released new CPUs, and there was some pent-up demand for them. However, looking forward, we think that if the proposed tariffs are imposed, the PC market will suffer a recession due to increased prices and unmatched increases in income, end quote. Intel's decrease here in the CPU market is predictable. It had 13th and 14th gen issues and then launched a disastrous product with Arrow Lake, which was underwhelming in just about every possible aspect and even had some stability problems. So the company is simply not competitive right now in CPU, and Intel has become a GPU company as far as the enthusiast audience is concerned. It's a wild time, but exciting as well, at least for the GPU side. Be good if they didn't screw up the CPUs, because we need two companies at least in CPUs. But GPU is a good save, I guess. All right, speaking of tariffs, trade issues between China and the US recently have been escalating. So on this note, on Monday, December 2nd, the US issued new controls that restrict exports to 140 companies. According to Reuters, this includes chip equipment makers Nora Technology Group and ACM Research. The publication notes that this represents, quote, the third US crackdown on the Chinese sector in 3 years, focused on chip-making equipment, software, and high-bandwidth memory, end quote. Reuters also writes this, quote, the Biden administration says the restrictions are aimed at limiting China's ability to access and produce chips that advance AI for military applications or threaten U.S. national security, end quote. A day after the reveal of these restricted Chinese companies, China responded by restricting numerous rare minerals to the U.S. The New York Times, via republication on MSN, notes that these, quote, include the sales of gallium, germanium, antimony, and so-called super-hard materials. The publication adds, quote, the ban signals Beijing's willingness to engage in supply chain warfare by blocking the export of important components used to make valuable products, like weaponry and semiconductors, end quote. Now, looking for some background on this story so we could better understand the importance of these, we ran into a Wikipedia article which states, quote, elemental germanium is used as a semiconductor in transistors and various other electronic devices. Presently, the major end uses are fiber optic systems, infrared optics, solar cell applications, and light-emitting diodes, or LEDs. And that's going to be the tipping point for all of this. RGB LEDs. They're holding up all of global trade. It's all going to be at risk because RGB LEDs might be at risk. That's our takeaway for this story. It's definitely the most important part. Anyway, as for gallium, other than use in liquid metals, which will soon show getting made in Germany, it's also used in common electronics. Some quick research turned up indium.com, which noted this, quote, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices inside today's laptops, cell phones, and tablets use gallium arsenide, GaAs, semiconductors that utilize its properties to build radio frequency integrated circuits. In recent years, chargers for mobile devices have become much smaller while also providing more power and faster charging cycles because they use gallium nitride-powered semiconductor chips. The MSN republication of the New York Times story also noted that the US has not mined gallium since apparently 1987, with Japan supplying 26% of it to the US, followed by China at 21% and Germany at 19%. So all that to say, with some of the really low-level supply-side restrictions between multiple nations at this point, it may affect the computer industry. We're really not sure to what extent each of these individual things will. Tariffs certainly would, depending on how they're implemented, and have in the past. The last time there were some major tariffs, we saw computer case prices, for example, go up, and they just never came back down for the type of case. But as far as this specific set of restrictions, it looks like the U.S. already has a diversified supply of at least some of these materials, based on the Reuters and MSN articles. And our understanding is that China provides a significant portion of the newly restricted materials, but it just depends on which material you're looking at. Now, one of the things we were thinking about, and GN is not, nor does it pretend to be some sort of macroeconomics or supply-side materials expert publication. I don't know. That's my preface to this. I have no idea. I don't know anything about anything. But one of the things I was thinking about for this was there are restrictions of some of these materials into the U.S., but a lot of the devices that we deal with day to day in our coverage scope are made entirely in China. Some of them are made in Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, but a lot of it's made in China. And if that is not a restriction that applies to sort of quote unquote domestically made devices in China and only for the sale of those materials to the US, then it may not affect everything in the way that you would expect by just sort of looking at where is gallium and where are these other materials or metals used. But once again, I know nothing about nothing regarding sort of the greater, I'm no expert on this. I'm just reading the news, and we compiled a report, wrote it up between multiple sources, and there you go. While we're on stories sourced from Reuters, this next one was pretty interesting. The publication is now reporting that NVIDIA and TSMC are allegedly in talks to manufacture Blackwell GPUs in the US, specifically at TSMC's new plant in Arizona. The news outlet cited 3 unnamed sources and wrote, quote, TSMC is already making preparations to start production early next year, end quote. With these unnamed sources' stories, speaking from experience of our own, it all just comes down to how reliable the outlet is in vetting its sources. Reuters has had a very strong track record with silicon industry leaks in the past couple months, especially from TSMC and Intel as it relates to their Arizona fab. So they've been pretty on top of it with this stuff. All right, thus far, NVIDIA's Blackwell chips have been manufactured in Taiwan. If it were to produce GPUs within the US, the company could diversify its supply chain and potentially shorten production times, especially for delivery to US-based companies. However, Reuters states that, quote, while TSMC plans to produce the front-end process of NVIDIA's Blackwell chips in Arizona, the chips will still need to be shipped back to Taiwan for packaging. The Arizona facility does not have chip-on-wafer-on-substrate or CoWoS capacity that is essential for the Blackwell chips, end quote. CoWoS, or chip-on-wafer-on-substrate, is a special type of advanced packaging that's used by TSMC, and chip packaging here refers to how the silicon is sort of harnessed and mounted to the interposer, the substrate, and assembling the whole actual package of the chip itself. So this is not like box packaging, but it's the much more advanced silicon packaging, and actually is an advanced technology that requires specialized fabs as well. So you'll still find clean rooms and sort of all that same sort of stuff in a packaging facility. So it's not something that can just be popped up anywhere. According to Reuters, both AMD and Apple are already current customers producing chips out of TSMC's Arizona facility, or will be as they continue to get those facilities online. 8BitDo, perhaps most famous for its controllers, and secondly, most famous for no one knowing if you're supposed to say 8BitDo or 8BitDo. I've found extremely heated arguments between both sides. Every time we come across the company's name, people in not only our comments, but before we run the story, I research it again on the internet, and I find 2 extremely certain camps that it is pronounced both ways. So we're going to use both. 8BitDo has gotten into keyboard and mice products recently, and it recently revealed that it's worked with Microsoft to design some retro Xbox-themed PC peripherals. The Xbox edition of the 8BitDo Retro 87 mechanical keyboard uses a translucent green design. The company notes that it's, quote, inspired by the original Xbox console, end quote, seemingly referencing the original Xbox debug kit and maybe some of the Halo edition or early renditions of the Xbox. Other retail units were solid colors for the Xbox. Regardless, like the original Xbox controller, 8-Bit Duo has arrow keys that share the same color as the OG Xbox controller's face buttons. The 8-Bit Duo Retro 87 is a wireless keyboard, though users can use it wired as well, and can also switch between 2.4 GHz or Bluetooth mode. On top of the 8-Bit Duo keyboard, there's a volume dial and an integrated Xbox button, which, by default when pressed, activates the Windows game bar. In other words, when all of the keys start failing eventually from you typing tens to hundreds of millions of times on them, the one button that will continue to work will be that one. How's that for an extremely long-winded way to say this button is useless? Unlike the original Xbox console, the keyboard features 8 RGB lighting modes. For its keys, it uses Kale Jellyfish X switches. Supplementing the keyboard is the Xbox edition of 8-Bit Duo's Retro R8 mouse. The wireless mouse mirrors the same translucent green aesthetic and comes with a charging dock. It also features a symmetrical design and has 2 programmable buttons on either side, which are the same color as the Xbox controller's face buttons. The Retro R8 mouse uses Kale Sword GMX micro switches, which 8-Bit Duo claims is, quote, engineered for up to 100 million clicks, which is enough that the only real response to it is, sure, whatever. We don't really have a great way to test that, so we'll take them at their word for now. The company also says that it uses a PAW 3395 sensor and supports 6 sensitivity levels ranging from 50 dpi 26,000 dpi at the high end, with polling rates ranging from 125 to 8,000 hertz. And as for our continued coverage of this company as it keeps launching pretty cool and interesting peripherals, I'm gonna go find them at the next trade show we're at, spend 10 seconds at their booth, and force them to answer on camera how you're supposed to say this name, because I'm tired of trying to pick between the two very, very certain camps in the comments on it. So that's it for this one. Argue with your peers in the comments about why you're right and they're wrong on the naming. Check back for more. As always, subscribe, and go check out Bauer's video. I was in it briefly on his channel in both the EN and the German version of it, and we'll see you all next time.